The scent of sizzling burgers danced through the warm Georgia air as Ethan Walker flipped patties on his new backyard grill. His sister Amelia laughed as she ran barefoot through the grass, chasing her kids who darted through the sprinkler with glee. It was Ethan's first family visit since moving into Maplewood Grove, a pristine gated community nestled outside Savannah, known for its manicured lawns and postcard-perfect streets. Ethan had only been here for 2 months. After a stressful few years in the city, he'd been drawn in by the neighborhood's promise of peace, safety, and charm. He never imagined that such perfection could hide something so toxic. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" A voice sliced through the laughter like a blade. A woman, mid-50s, with helmet blonde curls and a clipboard clutched like a sword, stood on Ethan's lawn uninvited. Her floral blouse looked more military than cheerful. "I'm just having a family barbecue," Ethan replied politely, tongs in hand. She squinted at him like he'd committed a felony. "I'm Charlotte Whitman, president of the Maplewood Grove Homeowners Association." That's when everything started to unravel. Ethan stared at Charlotte Whitman, stunned. The laughter that had filled the backyard only seconds ago faded into uneasy silence. His niece clutched a wet toy, looking back and forth between the adults, confused. "Are these individuals registered with the HOA office at least 72 hours in advance?" Charlotte asked, her tone sharper than a courtroom gavel. "They're my family," Ethan said slowly. "They're visiting for the weekend." Charlotte's lips pinched into a thin line. "Our bylaws, specifically Clause 4.7.2, state that all visitors must be pre-approved. This includes overnight guests." Amelia stepped forward, still holding a cup of lemonade. "We're just here for the weekend. The kids aren't causing any trouble." Charlotte didn't even look at her. "Unregistered guests, noise disturbance, and an improperly parked vehicle," she rattled off, pointing her pen toward Amelia's minivan. "This is a formal violation. Consider this your first strike, Mr. Walker. 3 strikes, and you're subject to community fines or even restrictions." Ethan set down the grill tongs and raised his hands. "Look, I didn't know. If that's the rule, I'll take care of it Monday." "That's not how it works," she replied, her smile strained. "They need to leave today and may return only after proper approval." His father, Judge Samuel Walker, who had been quietly sipping iced tea on the porch, stood up. Though 67, he still had a presence that could silence a courtroom or an entire jury. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "are you seriously telling my son that his own family cannot visit him without permission?" Charlotte faltered but recovered quickly. "Mr. Judge Samuel Walker, Federal Bench, Southern District." There was a visible shift in Charlotte's posture. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard. "Well," she cleared her throat, "even federal judges must adhere to community regulations. Rules apply to everyone." Samuel's voice was calm but steel-edged. "I'd be curious to see the legal precedent where a private homeowners association has the power to regulate family visits on privately owned property. The rules are in the community covenant your son signed," she snapped. "He agreed to them. Does the covenant specifically mention family members?" he asked. Charlotte hesitated. "It says all visitors." "That's vague," Samuel replied, "and unenforceable when applied to immediate family on private residential property. You may want to rethink your interpretation before someone else does." Charlotte's face turned a shade of red. "I'll let this one go, but this is your official warning." Without another word, she turned and marched off the lawn like a general leaving a battlefield. Amelia looked at Ethan in disbelief. "Is she for real?" Ethan gave a weak smile. "First time I've seen it. Probably nothing to worry about." But the joy of that long-awaited family reunion had vanished. His nephew asked timidly, "Are we going to get kicked out?" Ethan knelt beside him. "No, buddy. No one's kicking you out." He hoped he was right. But when his father leaned in that night and said, "Read your covenant, son," carefully, Ethan felt the first chill of something far more serious than just a nosy neighbor. This wasn't just about rules. It was about control. 3 days after the barbecue incident, Ethan was still trying to brush off the strange tension that had settled over his home. Maybe Charlotte Whitman was just one of those people who took their volunteer positions a little too seriously. But then came the next shock. It was Ethan's 35th birthday. His parents had surprised him with a homemade chocolate cake, a wrapped gift box, and plenty of love to chase away the stress of work and that awkward HOA encounter. They sat together on the porch, sipping iced tea as the sun dipped below the Georgia pines. Then the black SUV appeared again. It rolled slowly down the street, passed by once, turned around, and parked across from his house. Ethan's mother, Linda, peered curiously at the vehicle. "You think they're lost?" Ethan already had a sinking feeling. Charlotte stepped out, this time with Gerald Klein, the HOA vice president, a balding man with a smug smile, and Ivy Rhodes, the HOA secretary whose ever-present clipboard seemed surgically attached to her hand. They walked toward the porch like they were serving a warrant. "Mr. Walker," Charlotte said loudly, "not even on the sidewalk yet. These individuals need to be identified immediately." Ethan stood, blocking his parents from view. "They're my parents. They surprised me for my birthday." Gerald tapped away on a tablet. "No registration in the system," he announced with satisfaction. "This is your second violation, Walker." Linda looked baffled. "This can't be real." "We take community security very seriously," Ivy said, adjusting her glasses. "We have no way of confirming who you are." Samuel rose slowly. "We've already met, Ms. Whitman. You know exactly who I am." Charlotte's smile turned icy. "Exactly. All the more reason you should understand that rules apply evenly regardless of status." Gerald handed Ethan a pink slip. $500 fine. Due in 10 days? Ethan nearly dropped it. "For what? Having my parents visit me for my birthday?" "Violation of Article 4.7.2, failure to register visitors," Charlotte said crisply. "We've already documented the incident with photographs." Linda's jaw dropped. "You took pictures of our car?" "Standard documentation procedure," Ivy replied. They left just as stiffly as they came, and Ethan could feel eyes watching from behind curtains. The moment they were gone, his father carefully unfolded the fine notice. "This is serious," Samuel said. "They've crossed a line." Later that night, as the birthday cake sat half-eaten on the counter, Ethan couldn't sleep. He rummaged through his filing cabinet and pulled out the HOA covenant. Buried deep in the fine print, he found the clause Charlotte had quoted. But the language was vague. It referred to extended guests using community facilities, not short family visits to private homes. His phone buzzed with a new email, subject, Security Policy Update, all guests must provide ID and pass background checks to use any amenities. Then a text from an unknown number, Tuesday's meeting isn't optional. If you want to stay in good standing. Ethan stared out the window into the quiet street. Maplewood Grove no longer felt like home. It felt like a trap. Ethan had always believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. He figured some rules, however annoying, existed for a reason. But after the surprise fine, the public shaming, and now the mandatory background checks, that belief was beginning to fracture. Tuesday evening arrived with an eerie stillness. A paper had been slipped into Ethan's mailbox earlier that day, unsigned but unmistakably typed in Charlotte Whitman's font and tone, "Board meeting tonight. Attendance required." He called his father before heading over. "Should I even go?" "You have to," Samuel said. "But this time, don't just listen. Pay attention. Take notes." Ethan walked into the Maplewood Grove Community Center and immediately noticed how different the atmosphere was. The usual polite nods from neighbors had been replaced with sideways glances and hushed whispers. Charlotte sat at the front, flanked by Gerald and Ivy with their tablets and clipboards arranged like courtroom exhibits. "We'll begin," Charlotte said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Due to rising concerns about unregistered guests and potential security breaches, the board is implementing additional measures effective immediately." Ivy stood, reading from a sheet. "All visitors must provide 2 forms of ID and pass a digital background check before entry to the community. Repeat offenders may face property access restrictions under Section 8.4. Ethan raised his hand. "Access restrictions? On private property? You're banning people from their own homes?" Gerald smirked. "Just from bringing unauthorized guests. It's for everyone's safety." "This isn't about safety," Ethan said, his voice rising. "It's about control. My parents came to visit me for my birthday and you fined me $500. Where in the covenant does it say that's illegal?" Charlotte's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "The community voted on these amendments." Ethan scanned the room. "We voted? I never saw a ballot." Charlotte paused. Electronic vote. Board only for efficiency. Something in Ethan snapped. The fear, the discomfort, the isolation, it all turned into focus. This isn't a community, he said clearly, standing tall. It's a dictatorship with well-trimmed hedges. Gasps rippled through the room. Charlotte recovered quickly. You're free to leave. Maplewood Grove if you don't like how we protect our values. I'd rather fix it, Ethan said, meeting her gaze. Starting with reporting this board's abuse of authority. He walked out into the night, heart pounding. His phone buzzed again, another message from an unknown number. Don't fight them. They always win. But Ethan wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't alone either. On his way home, an older neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, flagged him down. I heard what you said in there, she whispered. We've been waiting for someone to speak up. As the porch light flickered behind him and the HOA's shadow loomed over his once perfect life, Ethan realized something critical. The real threat wasn't the rules. It was the silence. And he wasn't staying quiet anymore. The next morning, Ethan awoke to the soft vibration of his phone. It was his sister Amelia, her voice shaky. Ethan, my water broke. The baby's coming 6 weeks early. He was already halfway out of bed. Amelia and her husband Tom had been staying with him while their house underwent renovations. The doctor had assured them the baby wouldn't arrive until next month. Ethan raced to their guest room, helped Amelia into the car, and told Tom to grab the hospital bag. We'll make it in 15 minutes, he said, trying to sound calm. But as he reversed down his driveway, blinding headlights stopped him cold. A black SUV blocked the exit. Charlotte Whitman stepped out, arms crossed, followed by Gerald, Ivy, and another board member holding a clipboard. Going somewhere with unregistered guests? Charlotte asked, gesturing toward Amelia, who groaned through a contraction. Ethan's blood boiled. She's in labor. Move your car. You should have planned ahead, Gerald said, smug as ever. Rules are rules. Tom ran out with the hospital bag. Please. She's bleeding. Charlotte's expression wavered. We need to verify this isn't another attempt to violate the HOA's guest policy. Amelia screamed, her hands gripping the seat. Red stained her maternity dress. Call an ambulance. Ethan barked at Tom, who was already dialing. Charlotte froze. Neighbors began peeking through windows and stepping onto their porches. One, Mrs. Holloway, ran over in a bathrobe. Are you insane? That woman needs medical help. Stay out of this, Charlotte snapped. This is HOA business. Sirens howled in the distance, but the ambulance had to stop at the end of the street. Paramedics rushed in on foot with a gurney. They loaded Amelia quickly, her face pale with pain. Tom climbed into the ambulance. Ethan turned to Charlotte, his voice icy. Move. Your car. Charlotte lifted her chin defiantly. The board has voted. Due to repeated violations, your family is banned from Maplewood Grove. Gasps rose from the crowd. Mrs. Holloway's face twisted in disbelief. You can't do that. Gerald held up his tablet. Section 9.3 grants us emergency authority. Ethan didn't wait for more. Once the SUV moved, he tore down the street toward the hospital. Amelia gave birth to a tiny, premature but strong baby girl an hour later. While she rested, Ethan called his father. You won't believe what just happened. After a long pause, Samuel replied with calm fury. Text me Charlotte Whitman and Gerald Klein's full names and addresses. What are you going to do? Ethan asked. Nothing illegal, his father said. But no one endangers my granddaughter. That night, Samuel arrived at the hospital. Gone was the retired gentleman from the barbecue. This was the federal judge who'd dismantled criminal enterprises. I've made a few calls, he said quietly. Their HOA incorporation? Improperly filed. Their authority? Legally questionable. And Gerald? He's been funneling HOA landscaping contracts to his own company. Ethan's eyes widened. How do you know that? Because, Samuel said with a slight smile, I've seen this game before. And I've already started writing the rules to end it. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind. Between hospital visits, work, and helping Amelia recover, Ethan barely had time to think, yet something inside him had shifted. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was planning. Back at Maplewood Grove, things were unraveling fast. In his mailbox, Ethan found two things, a letter confirming his property taxes and a certified notice from the HOA. Fine, $1,500. Reason, pattern of visitor violations. Penalty, lien proceedings begin in 30 days if unpaid. Ethan stood motionless, hands trembling. But when he brought the letter to his father, Samuel's eyes lit up, not with fear, but with clarity. This, he said, is exactly what we needed. Ethan blinked. They're trying to take my house. Which makes this no longer just a civil dispute, Samuel said, folding the letter. They've formalized an illegal action in writing. The next morning, 3 county vehicles with government seals parked in front of the HOA's community center. Ethan watched in disbelief as men and women in suits walked in carrying boxes. Mrs. Holloway ran up from across the street. "You did this, didn't you?" "My father did," Ethan replied, with the law on his side. Inside, Charlotte argued furiously with a tall woman in a gray blazer. "You can't just come in here. This is private property." The official held up a warrant. "Under County Code 43.7, we are authorized to inspect all HOA financial records." Immediately, Ethan's neighbors began to gather, whispering among themselves. Gerald appeared, still in his bathrobe, trying to play damage control, but no one was listening anymore. As the sun climbed higher, people began knocking on Ethan's door. One by one, neighbors came to share their own horror stories. Absurd fines, denied improvement requests, holiday decorations being torn down. Ethan listened, took notes, and most importantly, believed them. He wasn't the only one who had suffered. He had just been the first to stand up. By 3 p.m., a reporter from the Savannah County Chronicle showed up. "Ethan Walker?" she asked. "Would you be willing to speak about the investigation?" Before he could answer, his phone rang. It was Amelia. "The baby's oxygen dropped," she said tearfully. "They've moved her to intensive care." Ethan froze. "I'll be right there." As he grabbed his keys, Charlotte and Gerald appeared at his driveway. "Going to visit more unauthorized guests?" Charlotte sneered. Ethan pulled out his phone and hit record. "If you block me now, during a medical emergency, I will make sure every news outlet in Georgia knows your face and name." Charlotte stepped back, stunned. "Furthermore," he added, "the county is already investigating your actions. You might want to focus on your own legal defense instead of intimidating residents." They didn't follow him this time. At the hospital, the baby's condition stabilized. Amelia was resting. Tom was by her side. Samuel met Ethan in the waiting room. "The investigation's expanding," he said. "We found duplicate payments to Gerald's company, triple market rate. And Charlotte? She's been signing contracts under a false legal title." Ethan sat quietly, absorbing it all. Weeks ago, he just wanted to grill burgers in peace. Now, he was leading a movement. He wasn't the quiet newcomer anymore. He was the voice the community had needed all along. Rain slammed against the windows of the Maplewood Grove Community Center. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. More than 100 residents had crammed into the room. People who had never shown up to board meetings before, now whispering and exchanging stories of years under quiet oppression. Ethan slipped in quietly, soaked from the storm, just as his father stepped into the room. Judge Samuel Walker, no longer in retirement mode, strode to the front of the room with a thick folder in hand. He placed it on the board's table with calm precision. Charlotte stood abruptly. "Who invited him?" "He's not a resident." An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, rose from the back. "I invited him. We all did." Her voice was steady. "We're tired of being bullied." Charlotte's face flushed with rage. "This is against procedure." Samuel cleared his throat. "My name is Judge Samuel Walker. My son lives here. I'm here because I'm deeply concerned about how this HOA has been operating." Gerald rolled his eyes. "You have no legal authority here." Samuel opened the folder and calmly replied, "Perhaps, but these documents do." He lifted several pages. Financial records showing $43,000 paid to a consulting company incorporated by Charlotte's husband, landscaping invoices paid to Gerald's company, 3 times above market rates, and surveillance equipment purchased with community funds, installed without resident consent. Gasps filled the room. "Furthermore," Samuel continued, "the rules you've been using to justify fines and bans were never properly filed with the county. Your HOA lacks legal standing to enforce half of what you've been doing." Gerald dropped his pen. A neighbor stood up. "Is that why our park project was canceled while board members got new fencing?" Samuel nodded. "That money was rerouted to properties owned by board members." Charlotte was trembling now. You can't prove anything. That's the best part, Samuel said gently. I don't have to. The county auditor is here. He gestured toward the back, where two officials stood with notepads in hand. Suddenly, Mrs. Patel, another resident, rose. I move to remove the current board under emergency vote. Seconded, shouted half the room. Ethan stood now, feeling the energy shift like a tidal wave. He met his father's proud gaze, then spoke for the first time. I moved here for peace, not politics. I just wanted to barbecue with my family. But what started as one ridiculous fine became something bigger, about fairness and about protecting each other. The vote was unanimous. Charlotte and Gerald were officially removed. Just as they gathered their belongings, a county official stepped forward. Charlotte Whitman? Gerald Klein? You're under investigation for financial misconduct. We'd like to ask you a few questions. As they were escorted out, the room erupted. Not in chaos, but in applause. Weeks later, Ethan stood beside a sparkling new community pool, finally completed using recovered funds. Families laughed, kids splashed, and neighbors smiled freely for the first time in years. Mrs. Jenkins handed Ethan a lemonade. All this, she said, because you stood up. Ethan looked around at the transformed community and finally allowed himself to smile. Sometimes it only takes one person to break the silence so everyone else can finally be heard. What began as a harmless family visit turned into a fierce battle for justice. One that revealed how unchecked authority can silently corrode a community from within. Ethan Walker never set out to be a hero. He didn't have a plan to challenge his HOA or expose corruption. All he wanted was to share a few burgers with his family. But when he stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated, he gave others the courage to speak up too. The real lesson? Never underestimate the power of one voice, especially when it's grounded in truth. Systems of control often thrive in silence, but they crumble the moment people unite against them. Rules matter, but so does compassion, fairness, and the courage to question when something feels wrong. True leadership isn't about enforcing power, it's about protecting people. If you're living under an HOA, workplace policy, or any system that feels unjust, don't stay silent. Read the fine print. Ask questions. Organize with others who feel the same way. You don't need to be a lawyer or a judge to demand fairness. Just someone willing to speak up. Start small. Attend meetings, request transparency, and document everything. Power often hides behind complexity, but truth has a way of shining through when you hold it up to the light. And never forget, you deserve to feel safe and welcome in your own home. If the story inspired you, hit like and subscribe for more powerful real-life narratives. Would you stand up to your HOA if this happened to you? Comment below.